Frieren centers around a multitude of themes and messages throughout the story, whether it be about the regret, the joys of life, immortality through legacy, and so on. Himmel is the perfect character to represent everything that makes the story so special. One can argue that without him, the story wouldn't have the unique touch that makes a lot of its fans drawn to it, especially with how unique his character is. Conceptually, he's not the most original character out there, but it's the way he's written and the many traits he has which emphasize Frieren's growth that makes him stand out among the rest. One simply cannot talk about Himmel's character without exploring Frieren's. He's a man who influenced the hearts of many and left a legacy for years to come, remembered for his grandiose deeds of defeating the Demon King, as well as the other smaller deeds of simply just helping the elderly with carrying things. A man who wants to leave a mark on this world, to let it be known that he existed on this planet and carved his way to the top. Living by the many philosophies that are profound and enriching, it is those philosophies that really resonate within Frieren years later. Best part of it all, he was nothing but a normal guy who wasn't given anything to become the chosen one. Regret is in everybody. Whether it be somebody you cherish that you took for granted, the reality hits hard once you realize they're truly gone. Decisions that you wish you could have gone back in time and redone that situation. Actions you think you should have taken when you originally decided against it. This is the situation that Frieren sees herself in. For the longest, she's lived her life apathetically, never really taking things seriously. Not to mention, she has never understood just what was so special about humans and their feelings. She would dismiss a ton of Himmel's advances and events that the four of them found themselves in, such as the New Year's festival. It's just a sunrise. What's so special about it? It ties into the long lifespan of elves, considering the fact that 10 years is nothing noteworthy of her, and that she's lived for over 1,000, likely causing her to be this way. What's the point of living if the concept of death is just so far away? This scene of the party discussing the existence of heaven hammers down this point. Life can't be meaningless this way. There is meaning in living your best life and getting rewarded for it in the long run. And I think this really does work to highlight Frieren learning about the importance of life and living life to the fullest, which is something we'll get more into in the next segment. It isn't Himmel's funeral that really kicks in Himmel's death for Frieren. It's him being buried right in front of her eyes. She was distant and detached towards him, that amidst all things that are flashing before her eyes, their experiences throughout their 10-year-long journey, she regrets not knowing him better. 10 years should mean nothing to her. Himmel's involvement in her life is less than 1/10 of her life, yet in this moment it meant the entire world for her. And from here on, she starts to grow and change in order to understand the many things that she couldn't fathom throughout the 10-year journey. The only way to tackle your regrets is to move on and live in the present, although while acknowledging and accepting those mistakes for what they are and learning from them. Frieren starts going through different places, and we see a ton of things she does that really does highlight her growth from her regret. For instance, she's willing to put blue moon wheat flowers that grew in Himmel's hometown, under one of his statues. She spends so much time looking for those flowers even though the last sighting was decades ago. But she doesn't give up. She keeps on searching, having a goal to find these flowers in order to fulfill Himmel's promise of wanting to show them to her, as well as serving as Frieren really taking her life seriously here. She understands what it is that made those flowers beautiful, and for Frieren, this is a huge step forward. She makes sure not to repeat the same mistake of taking her companions for granted, as she tries her hardest to understand her disciple Fern and figure out her interests to be able to buy her a birthday gift as an example. She may have not been able to figure it out completely as of yet, but it's the attempt that counts, and over the course of the story, you can really see that these two are very close in comparison to how Frieren was with her party, and she does truly learn from this mistake of hers when it came to Himmel and the others back then. Frieren and Sign's parallel is something that really emphasizes on this theme of regret in the story, especially on Frieren's growth on said regret. Like Frieren, he also has regrets at being unable to become an adventurer alongside his friend since he has been missing for 10 years. He lies and makes excuses on why he can't become an adventurer anymore. That was a long time ago. It's too late. He took too long and his friend promised he'd come back in 3 years, but it's been 10. He's probably already dead. Frieren sees her old self inside. She knows how painful it is to lose the chance to want to do something permanently. She knows the pain of losing somebody you care for. Hell, she's wasted more time than anybody else in the story, considering that she's wandered around aimlessly up to this point, and only now does she realize the value of it all. So, does it really matter? Should the amount of time lost really dictate your drive to want to do something? There are many things in this world that people want to do but write them off because they feel as though it's been too late to get into them. Take drawing, for example, where some people make excuses because it's too late or they didn't learn how to draw from an early age, until eventually it really will be too late. The important thing is to take the first step. and even getting that first push needed to take that first step, and Frieren does exactly this with Sign. She will not leave Sign behind and vow to have him venture with them so that he would go on to search for his friend. There's a chance that he will still be out there, so why dwell on it and not go out there and search for his friend? It's this entire segment that really encapsulates one of Himmel's most important philosophies, and the thing that really drives his character forward: living in the present. It's such a simple concept, yet so hard to practice for many. It's interesting because it adds on this whole thing of him not being the chosen one and being unable to pull the sword out. He's not chained to some past of his, and he's only focused in the now, as opposed to Frieren originally being shackled to how long it's been since she fought demons when she was reluctant to joining the crew originally. And it's this aspect that Frieren learns and wants to teach others in similar spots so that they don't fall into the same mistakes that she once did, and she succeeds in giving Sign the push needed to pursue becoming an adventurer. One of my favorite scenes of Himmel is when Aizen asks Himmel what the purpose of exploring the entire floor of a dungeon rather than going to the bottom of it to defeat the monster. To Himmel, one must explore the entire floor before proceeding to the next one. It may be foolish, but it's that foolish desire to want to enjoy every second of something, all the while helping people, defeating monsters, and finding treasures along the way is what makes Himmel, Himmel. There are many different scenes that really explore this facet of Himmel. The party spends time making shaved ice at the beginning of their journey, and Aizen finds it ridiculous and a waste of time, and that they should be preparing themselves for what's to come. Even Frieren herself in the dungeon scene emphasizes on this fact that the journey will become more life-threatening at some point, and it's uncertain whether or not they'll make it out alive. But does that really mean the journey must be an arduous and difficult one? Himmel much prefers a goofier journey, one that he can look back and laugh at alongside his friends when it's all over. Even at the most life-threatening of things, Himmel will and is going to live his life to the fullest and enjoy every second of it while he can, because life is short.
こんなことをしていていいのか？
別にいいじゃないか。まだ旅は始まったばかりなんだ。アイゼンは辛く苦しい旅がしたいのかい？僕はね、終わった後にくだらなかったって笑い飛ばせるような楽しい旅がしたいんだ。
His passion with everything he strives to do really oozes out of him, enough to influence the people around him, especially Frieren. I like this segment with the monster whose ability is summoning the illusion that would let its victim's guard go down as long as it's in character for said illusion. Yet when Frieren sees Himmel's illusion, he immediately tells Frieren to shoot him. And this just highlights just how open and passionate Himmel really was about everything. He's so honest and grounded to Frieren that she literally couldn't comprehend the mere idea of Himmel deceiving her. Initially, Frieren was this character who aimlessly went about life, an immortal being who never really comprehended the beauty and wonders of living. Anytime Himmel would do or suggest something that she should participate in, she ditches it because she doesn't get what's so special about it. It's just a sunrise, it shouldn't be a grandiose event. She's never been able to understand how to invest in relationships either, and it's shown in her realization that she never really knew Himmel's interests such as his favorite foods. But after Himmel's death, she starts to slowly realize the beauty that is life itself. From the human connections, the experiences that she's never understood during her time with Himmel's party, and so much more. The sunrise may have not been as exciting as she anticipated, but it was never about the sunrise itself. Sure, the sunrise looks pretty, but Frieren realizes that in that moment that it's being with Fern and seeing her enjoy herself is what makes that moment so enjoyable. And Himmel knew this of Frieren. He knew that somewhere in Frieren is somebody that really cares for others and keeps her promises. It may have taken over 30 years, but she still meets her promise with Himmel to watch the Era meteor shower at a location that Frieren promised to show him. Her habit of collecting random spells really turned into a hobby when Himmel complimented her smallness and randomness of spells, and this was something that Frieren appreciated. Until eventually, it clicks to Frieren just how important it is to enjoy adventures in the best way imaginable, and she makes sure of this with Sign. She knows how happy Himmel and the others were during their own journey to defeat the Demon King, and passes this ideal on to Sign. The time they've spent together was short, which ironically is an interesting parallel to Frieren and her party members, especially when you consider the fact that in the same light, their time was filled with entertainment and hijinks that Sign looks back on fondly as he goes on separate ways from the group. And most importantly, he doesn't repeat the same mistake that Frieren does in his journey with them. He cherishes the moments he had with the three of them as opposed to Frieren's detachment to Himmel and others at the time.
だからこそ、きっと私はきっかけを与えたかったんだろうね。
なんだそりゃ。
勇者ヒンメルならそうしたってことだよ。私はヒンメルたちに旅立つ勇気と仲間と過ごす楽しさを教えてもらった。どうザイン、楽しかったでしょ？
ああ、とても楽しかったよ。
Himmel's influence isn't just on Frieren, but it's everywhere around the world. From villagers he's helped on the most minuscule of things, children who were inspired by his stories and were taught the meaning of even the most mundane of stories can mean something to somebody, and so much more. There are a lot of things in the story that people cherish about Himmel. Starting off with Heiter, who despite coming off as this deadbeat priest whose only concern is getting drunk, ends up taking Frieren as a disciple and takes care of her. He does this because it's what Himmel would have done. He's always helped those in need and never neglected them even in the smallest of circumstances, because Himmel cannot bring himself to abandon those in need of help. Heiter yearns to do at least something noteworthy, because if he doesn't, then everything he's learned from Himmel and his memories would vanish without a trace. We also see Himmel's influence in characters like Wurble, who would do anything to protect his hometown. Initially, he was in love with a girl in his village and wanted to show off to her by vowing to kill all the demons so that she would one day return to the village. Not to mention, he was always a fan of Himmel's stories and his fantastical adventures against the many powerful obstacles that they faced. But the only stories he'd hear of him from the villagers were things that were mundane and uninteresting to a child. From protecting them from monsters, guarding merchants, or even helping them with carrying things. It never clicked with him until Himmel's death. They never spoke about those grandiose adventures of Himmel because they were never a part of it, nor did they have anything to do with it. The smaller deeds that Himmel has done for them were much more meaningful to them, even if it didn't impact the world one bit. But it left enough of an impression for them to remember him years after his death, and they were happy when talking about said deeds. It adds an aspect of realism because people would be thinking more about the things that somebody has done for them because it was something that affected them and left an impact, rather than things that they were never a part of, even if it was a massive ordeal. There are also different aspects of Frieren that Himmel has had influence in. For example, Frieren's quick farewells to temporary companions such as Sign or Craft was something that she took from Himmel. To him, he'd rather not make it too sentimental, because it may be embarrassing for when the time comes for them to meet again. As long as they keep adventuring, they will surely cross paths. It's a way to expand on Himmel's way of life and how he intends to enjoy every minute of it. As long as he's still breathing, he will surely meet all these people again along the way. Frieren grows to learn from this and is aware that at some point, they will meet these companions once again. Another aspect that Frieren learns from Himmel's influence here is showing the care for others, even with the smallest of gestures. It's evident in Frieren's relationship to Fern throughout the series. She holds Fern's hand when she's sick, not because she is a child, but because Fern is in pain. Everybody needs emotional support in some shape or form, and this is something that Himmel teaches her. It's a great way to show how far she's come, especially when she praises Fern for becoming a first-class mage at the end of the season. And small gestures such as these go a long way in making their relationship feel stronger than before. I think this scene really defines how grounded Himmel feels as a character. Frieren asks Himmel why he helps people whenever he can. His response that it isn't really because he is a hero, but because he wants to be remembered, and this is one of Himmel's vital aspects of his character. It's an interesting contrast to Frieren. He's just a human, so his lifespan is much shorter than elves, and he definitely knows this. So I think the idea that he does all he can with the time he has to be remembered and immortalized in many's minds is powerful. We all want to be remembered for the things we've done and leave our mark in this world, a proof of our existence that we were there. We aren't around forever, so everybody wants to make the most of what they can with the time they have. But he also knows that with that in mind, Frieren will eventually be all alone. And this is why he goes around getting all these sculptures made of them. They existed. They are not fairy tales. They left an impact on this world that would be remembered by many, especially by Frieren herself. And most importantly, he wants Frieren to know that these sculptures represent that they will always be there for her, even for decades to come. In a sense, this aspect of Himmel explores the idea of immortality, figuratively and literally. To humans, elves like Frieren might as well be immortal in the literal sense, considering that they live for over 1,000 years. But her immortality caused her to feel lifeless and aimless, and it's only recently that she's felt alive thanks to the influence of Himmel in her life. Whereas in Himmel's case, his immortality, much after his death, is in the figurative sense. He's lived his life full of energy and adventure, and made the most of it despite how short it is in comparison to an elf. He may be gone now, but even over 20 years after his death, people still celebrate his achievements, and speak of him fondly and how much he's helped them along the way, even if some of the help he's done wasn't to impact the world in any shape or form. It's essential to note that Himmel was not the chosen one. He was not able to pull the hero's sword out from the stone, and hence, he's a fake hero by definition, but that doesn't stop him. To him, whether he's a fake or real hero is irrelevant, because as long as he manages to defeat the Demon King, then he will carve his way into becoming a true hero. In a way, the sword represents being shackled to an identity, the identity of a chosen hero, and being gifted the ability to attain that sword's strength and defeat adversaries with it. And while the chosen hero could still put in effort with the sword and master its powers and become a hero known by the masses, At the end of the day, he was gifted and was chosen to be one in the first place, and that title is something the chosen one will always have to live by, whether they want to admit it or not. But Himmel was not such a thing. He was just an ordinary and average guy, but despite this, he defeated the Demon King without some sacred sword, and proved to everybody that none of these things matter as long as you prove yourself to everybody with your efforts and strength. He's not dense nor is he naive. He gives the demon child a chance to live among the villagers, but the minute he confirms that there is no redeeming them, he immediately lets Frieren kill them without a second thought. And at the end of his journey, amidst all the things he's accomplished throughout his entire life, he managed to truly become an immortal hero, one whose tale will be passed on for generations to come.